And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. And I am your host and Sensei, Gary Michuta. It's great to be with you today. Got a great show in store for you. In fact, our guest coming up on the other side of the break is a person that if you've been paying half attention to apologetics over the years, you can't help but know about him because he is none other than the great Karl Keating is going to be coming on the show. Karl, of course, is the founder, one of the founders of Catholic Answers in San Diego, flagship postulate of apologetics that has grown and evolved over the years. Karl's a prolific author and just talk about a whole reservoir of apologetic knowledge. It's amazing his depth of knowledge in the field. And he's coming on the show. We're going to continue our series where we're going through some of the Catholic apologetic classics of the past that really, apologists today ought to familiarize yourselves with them because they are key to helping defend the faith. They're key to learning how to defend the faith, and they're just fun to read. And so today we're going to continue this series. We're going to be talking about Catholic dogma in a couple books that focus on Catholic dogmas, that is, official teachings of the Church, namely Ludwig Gott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, and also Teixeira's History of Catholic Dogma. So Karl's going to be coming on the other side of the break. And as always, we do our critical thinking skills through our Finding the Fallacy segment. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the Hasty Generalization. And we also meet an early church father. Today's early church father, pretty well known by apologists, not known outside of those who defend the faith. It is Saint Optatus of Melivis. Optatus of Melivis. And a fascinating individual, and he's going to cover an area in apologetics that you may have heard of, but maybe never realized where it came from. So that's kind of cool. So let's see. Let's do our shout-outs. I want to welcome all of you watching live stream via Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Hello, George. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Lucy. Hi, everyone. And I also want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and, indeed, around the world via podcast. It's kind of cool. I enjoy getting emails from I've gotten it from all over the world that have listened to this program religiously and from all points of the globe. So I want to welcome all of you. And by the way, if maybe you can't stay for Karl's interview, perhaps you're on lunch or going away from lunch or coming back from lunch, and you're going to miss it. So you can always access podcasts through virginmostpowerfulradio.org, all one word, virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Or, of course, you can email us. Or, the handy-dandy phone app. That's another way you can access it. You can also email us. I love receiving emails, questions, comments, thoughts. You can email us at questions@handsonapologetics.com. So, yes, hello from Arizona. Hey, we got a few from Arizona. All right, let's see. Why don't we jump into our Finding the Fallacy, shall we? Like I said, every episode we want to train our minds to think critically, so it helps us spot error. And, not only for apologetics, but it's so helpful just in ordinary life. TV commercials, political ads, or just conversations or blogging or what have you. You can pick out fallacious arguments here and there. So it's good skill set to have just for ordinary life, let alone apologetics. Today's Finding the Fallacy is hasty generalization. And basically, or it could be jumping to conclusions, another way to think of this fallacy, when you jump to a conclusion. So what is the fallacy? It occurs when a conclusion is made based on insufficient or non-representative data. Hence, you take the data and you jump to an ill-founded conclusion or a generalization. There was a couple of examples I got off the internet. For example, you visit a new country and the first person you meet at the airport is very rude. So, of course, you jump on your phone, your phone, and you text your friends saying that everyone in the new country is rude. Now, that would be a hasty generalization, wouldn't it? Why? Because, well, your statistical data just simply doesn't represent, right? At least they don't think so. You can't just base an entire country on the reaction of a single person. Or another one, example I got off the internet, says Christine has a terrible experience with her boyfriend, so she decides that all boys are mean. Okay, so that's another one where you jump to an ill-founded conclusion based on insufficient evidence, right? One person can't possibly supply the evidence for an entire category. I think this is pretty straightforward, and basically it's one of those fallacies that you disarm simply by calling it out. Or you could point to counter-examples, counter-evidence to show that, no, there are many exceptions to the rule. For example, you could find friendly people in that particular country to disprove the claim that the whole country is rude. Or you might be able to find some, good, solid Catholic boys, and who aren't mean, and that would prove that all boys are indeed not mean. Counter examples I think are good, or you could just point out, hey, you're jumping to a conclusion based on insufficient evidence. And that is our fallacy for today, the hasty generalization fallacy. So why don't we jump to the Meet the Early Church Fathers segment, who is Saint Optatus of Melivis, who was born sometime around AD 320, died sometime around AD 385. And of course, for our information in this segment, we go to Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers, which is a really great resource. It's certainly a 3-volume set that, if you're going to be defending the faith seriously, it's definitely at least a starter. You need to have it on your shelves to begin with. But anyway, let's talk about St. Optatus, shall we? The Donatists were the logical heirs of the Anabaptist sacramental practice of St. Cyprian of Carthage. Now, if you remember with St. Cyprian, in Carthage, North Africa underwent a very severe persecution. And many Catholics, many Christians surrendered their sacred books, and they offered incense to Caesar. They basically apostatized. But after the persecution, these Christians wanted to repent and come back to the fold, and that started a huge debate among Catholics as to whether the lapsed should come back, and under what conditions should the lapsed come back. Do we have to rebaptize them, or what do we do? So the Donatist heresy basically came from that. In fact, it started with a schism. The Donatist schism began around the year 312 AD, with the immediate antecedents going back to about 303 AD. It lasted for about 100 years. And interesting enough, this is one of those heresies that was confined largely to Africa. When Cecilian was consecrated Bishop of Carthage in 311 or 312, a rich widow named Lucilia, I believe it's pronounced by name, had a personal spite against them and succeeded in her design to have considerable part of the Carthaginian clergy to refuse to recognize the validity of his consecration on the grounds of his unworthiness for the consecration of bishops. Felix, in particular, was being accused of having surrendered the sacred books of Scripture during the Diocletian persecution, a charge which was subsequently found to be false. The dissident party chose a lector, one Majorinus, as bishop, and he was consecrated by Donatist, and was identified as Donatist with Donatus the Great, which is the name of the schism, so he becomes the arch heretic. It is only in latter days that the schism of both parties call forth their best advocates. For the Donatist, who believe that if someone is not spiritually worthy of receiving a sacrament, they don't receive the sacrament, Parmenion wrote on behalf of the Donatists, and our early church father today, Optatus of Melivis, was the champion for the Catholic or Orthodox side. Little is known about St. Optatus other than his own writings against Parmenion. The Bishop of Melivis in Numidian Africa Presumably, he was born around the year 320, lived about 385. So he's known largely through his work on the Donatist Schism. So this work was written about 367. Now, Parmenian's work in defense of the Donatists was entitled Against the Church of the Apostates, and that appeared in 363. Optatus' refutation is simply labeled the Book of Optatus, or Against the Parmenium is also another name, or Concerning the Schism of the Donatist. This was written a little later, in 367. It contains 6 books. A 7th book was added, perhaps by Optatus himself, or by some other person, probably around the year 385 AD. It was Optatus who was the first to clear expression to the principle that the sacraments are conferred their grace ex opere operato, which means by the work worked. When he wrote in Book 5, Chapter 4, the sacraments are holy in themselves and not on account of men. And that really is the heart of the Donatist Schism, folks, because what they were charging, or at least through this this very bitter widow, was that unless a person is worthy to receive the sacraments or is unworthy to confer the sacraments are invalid. Okay, so if you have a priest or a bishop who's in mortal sin or serious, other serious sins, that would invalidate the sacrament, which of course is wrong because the sacrament's powers come from Christ, not the minister, and hence you get grace by the work opere operato. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with Karl Keating about Christian classics. Stay tuned, folks.
This is Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio. This March, VMPR, in association with the Catholic Resource Center, will be hosting a special conference for the Adoramus Society. Adoramus at the Triduum, a conference on the spirituality of the Triduum liturgies, featuring speakers Father Joseph Fessio, Dr. Anthony Lillis, and Christopher Karstens, addressing such topics as developing a liturgical spirituality, the spirituality of Holy Thursday, the spirituality of Good Friday, and the spirituality of the Paschal Vigil and Easter season. It all takes place March 14, 2020, at the historic Sacred Heart Chapel at 381 West Center Street, Covina, California, 91723. You can register online at vmpr.org or call now at 877-526-2151 to reserve your seat today for Adoramus at the Triduum. Jesus said to the apostles in Luke chapter 10, "Whoever listens to you listens to me, and whoever rejects you rejects me." According to St. Boniface, in her voyage across the ocean of this world, the Church is like a great ship being pounded by the waves of life's different stresses. Our duty is not to abandon ship, but to keep her on course. May our Lord help us remain ever faithful to His Church, to aid and defend her.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome, everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. And it's time to talk about Catholic apologetic classics. I mean, there's so many great books out there that have been written in yesteryear, solid scholarship, and we learn a lot from them. But unfortunately, some of them fall out of print. Some of them, they're collecting dust somewhere. But new apologists today, we ought to be familiar with them, read them, use them as resources. They're just too valuable to kind of let them collect dust. And today we're going to continue our series on Catholic apologetic classics with Karl Keating. His bio is one that I almost am shy to say, because if you don't know about Karl Keating and you've been following anything in apologetics here in America, you know who he is. He's the founder of Catholic Answers. He's written tons of books. In fact, I think he wrote probably one of the modern Catholic apologetic classics, Catholicism, Fundamentalism. He also has Debating Catholicism series, Book for Life, No Apology. And also he writes in other several genres, such as religious, literature, outdoors, self-publishing, and so on. You can check out all of Karl's great works at his website, which is karlkeating.com. And Karl Keating, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
Gary, it's great to be back with you as always. I'm looking forward again to talking about a classic apologetics book.
Yes, absolutely. Before we begin, though, let me see if my bio's correct. Your current number of books that you have written, I have as 16. Is it still 16, or do you have more?
I think that's about right.
All right. Okay.
I've just a little while ago finished final proof of a manuscript of a book that'll come out fairly soon. Okay. And it's a kind of travelogue. It's a memoir of my hiking a pilgrimage route in Italy last year. And I'm pretty excited about it. I'm pretty pleased with the way it came out.
Great. Well, that's great. Yeah, so you heard it here first, folks. Start the buzz. Actually, it sounds like a great book. I can't wait to check it out when it comes out. So you definitely need to let us know when it's published.
I will do that, certainly.
All right. So now to other classics. That's a soon-to-be classic. Let's talk about our book for today, which is Ludwig Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. And we could at least start there. Tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, Ludwig Ott was a German. He lived from 1906 to 1985. He was ordained in 1930. And he put together one fat book that had been long before our time, was a classic. It was written in 1952. The edition I have is an English translation from 1960. The publication date was 1974. I don't know how often it's been reprinted since. But the Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma basically packs everything about the faith together in 400 pages of pretty small print. It's not an outline, it's literally, although it has outline-ish elements in that it's got short segments where everything's categorized. And Ott divides his work into a few main sections. The first one is, he titles The Unity and Trinity of God. So this is all about God's internal nature. And it's probably my favorite part of the book, actually. The second major division is called God the Creator. So it's about the Father. The third division is the doctrine of God the Redeemer. So it's about Christ. And the fourth division is the doctrine of God the Sanctifier, the Holy Spirit. So those are the main parts of the book. And under each one comes appropriate relevant information about doctrines that sort of flow with respect to that particular person of the Trinity. For example, in the fourth section about the Holy Spirit, we have a subsection on grace, because we get grace through the Holy Spirit most directly. So it's a wonderful book, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. But I have to say, it's not something I bet anybody's ever read straight through except for the proofreader.
How so? I know where you're coming from, but fill in the audience who hasn't read it.
Well, because, how many people actually read straight through an encyclopedia? Well, really, nobody. Okay. And this is encyclopedic in that it really covers everything in the faith. Ott is a man I wish I had known. He must have been a fascinating character because his depth of and breadth of reading was remarkable. Throughout the book, he has lots of citations to the Latin and Greek fathers and other historical personages, and even to non-Catholics, such as ancient heretics, Protestant reformers, and so on. And so there's citations to all these hundreds of different sources in his book. Yeah. So whenever he makes a claim, he always backs it up with a reference. So you can always track down what he's saying. But he has a wonderful ability to compress what others have said or taught. So, for example, from maybe some ancient church council, he'll take out the most relevant segments and put those into good play. And so you end up here getting a real sense of all the important stuff, and a lot of what many people might think is not so important stuff. But it's all here. And to put all this together in a coherent way is really remarkable. But there's so much of it, and it's so compressed and refined and detailed, it doesn't actually make for a fast read. On any one page, you're going to have to go fairly slowly to take it all in. In a way, it's like reading Thomas Aquinas. But I would say that you might have a little more ease reading through the Summa Theologiae straight, even though it's much longer than this. But you might be able to read it more directly that way than the Ott book, because Ott is something like an encyclopedia, or even almost like a dictionary with extended definitions of terms.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely encyclopedic. There isn't very much prose in the book. He doesn't really expand on things. Usually, if there's prose, it's because he's quoting sources.
Yeah, that's right. One of my favorite modern Catholic writer was Monsignor Ronald Knox. And he wrote a lot of theological stuff, but in a kind of laid-back, everyday talk kind of way. And you could just read him straight through, almost the way you would read a novel or, say, a detective story, because he also wrote detective stories. And that's just the way Knox wrote, but he passed along a lot of information. Ott, by comparison, nobody would read in a novelistic way. I mentioned elsewhere that his book has no plot, but it has a hero. And the hero, of course, is God. And if you want to know anything about God, or the church that he set up, or the moral law, or why the heretics of history were wrong, it's all here. Everything's here. And not enough that you could crib to get a PhD out of, but I'll tell you, you'd be a long way towards producing any kind of term paper you might need for a graduate course just by using this one book.
Yeah, I think that's really the genius of this book, is its structure and layout. It's very useful, incredibly useful, especially for apologists, because the way he has it laid out, you can do a lot of research very quickly just by reading a few sections of his book.
Precisely. I've often said that the most useful thing an apologist can say in public is, I don't know.
Right.
But not just I don't know, but I don't know, but I'll get back to you with the answer. Because every apologist is regularly stumped by questions. There are things we don't know, or we don't know well enough to explain at least. So Ott has been one of those books that if I don't know something, or I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, I go back to Ott, and I almost always find what I need there, and then I can expand my own thoughts from that. So it's been arguably one of the handiest books that I've ever come across. Catholic Evidence Training Outlines by Sheet and Ward would be the other. I would put those two books together as equipping any amateur to be able to become a competent apologist so long as he's willing to say honestly, and if necessary, frequently, I don't know, but I'll look it up and get back to you.
Yes.
The one thing some young apologists particularly try to do is they try to come off as omniscient. Nobody is omniscient. And you can be an apologist for 40 years and you're still not going to know everything. And an early sensible thing to do is to admit when you don't know something. But there's nothing so endearing as telling someone not just you don't know and don't have an answer, but that you'll get back to him with an answer, because that shows you go that extra step. Yeah. So the Catholic Evidence Training Outlines books, which we've talked about on the show before, and now Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, those two together are outline-ish in form, basically. So it's very easy for a budding apologist or an experienced apologist to turn to either one, find out what he needs in moments, really, and to compose a reply. So if you're somebody who's, for example, doing apologetic kinds of things online, and somebody poses a conundrum for you, it doesn't take any time, really, to work up an answer, even on something you didn't otherwise know. Where if you had to go, for example, to a regular encyclopedia or something, try to look it up and jump from one place to the other, it could take you hours to work up a simple answer to something, where in Ott, you'd be able to find it almost instantaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the main fears, I think, with people becoming apologists is, I don't know everything. I'm not a theologian. And one thing I know from my own personal experience is that when I have books like Ott, it gives me confidence that if I don't know the answer, at least I could go to Ott. And if it's anything substantive, chances are it'll be there.
That's right. I don't think I've ever come across a case in my experience as an apologist where I had to say, I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you, and then I couldn't find the answer.
Yeah.
Okay. I know knowing there's an answer out there, but I just couldn't track it down. I don't think this ever happened because the books I have on my shelves, such as Ott, such as the Sheed and Ward book I mentioned, those are sufficient, or have been for me at least sufficient in every single case to fill in my own gaps in knowledge. And then, of course, once you do that, I'm always very thankful to people who pose me questions that I can't answer to my own satisfaction, either at all, because I don't know anything about that topic, or I know something about it, but I'm not comfortable giving an answer because I want to make sure I say things the right way. But I'm always grateful to those people because it's an opportunity for me to go back and learn.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're chatting with Master Apologist Karl Keating about Catholic Apologetic Classics. We're talking about Ludwig Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. We'll get into a little bit more on the other side of the break. You're listening to Hands on Apologetics.
This is Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio. This March, VMPR, in association with the Catholic Resource Center, will be hosting a special conference for the Adoramus Society. Adoramus at the Triduum, a conference on the spirituality of the Triduum liturgies, featuring speakers Father Joseph Fessio, Dr. Anthony Lillis, and Christopher Carstens, addressing such topics as developing a liturgical spirituality, the spirituality of Holy Thursday, the spirituality of Good Friday, and the spirituality of the Paschal Vigil and Easter season. It all takes place March 14, 2020, at the historic Sacred Heart Chapel at 381 West Center Street, Covina, California, 91723. You can register online at vmpr.org or call now at 877-526-2151 to reserve your seat today for Adoramus at the Triduum.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome, everybody. We are chatting with Karl Keating about the Christian classic Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig Ott. And Karl, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to kind of walk through a little bit with the structure of this book. And I have a couple of questions for you I'd like to throw out. Okay, so a typical example for those who maybe if you don't have the book and you'd like to pick it up, he breaks the faith into sections. For example, one section would be the reality of the divine creation of the world. Then he'll state the Catholic teaching on it. For example, all that exists outside God was in its whole substance produced out of nothing by God. Then he says de fide, which is a theological note. And maybe could you explain what is a theological note? And why don't we use theological notes more today than we did back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s?
You know, one of the interesting things in Ott's book is his first, it's almost a preface really, explains, among other things, the levels of theological certainty in church teachings. And so something as de fide, that is of the faith, is something we know from Revelation is so profoundly true that you've got to accept it to be a Christian. I mean, there's, you know, if you don't accept, for example, the divinity of Jesus Christ, aside from being wrong, you're not a Christian because that's fundamental.
Right.
You know, you got to start with something like that. So there are things we know and that the church teaches us that are absolutely positively certain. And there's no misunderstanding about them. And so something de fide, the Latin term, indicates that. There are lesser degrees of certainty. For example, there are theological conclusions that we can draw from de fide propositions that we have. And that makes sense because if we know A and we know B, the human mind is always going to think, what can I conclude from the fact that we know those two things? Well, I can conclude C. And if A and B are both known for absolutely sure, even though the church doesn't perhaps formally define C as a de fide item to hold, we can still have certainty about it. It's a little different level of certainty, but still certainty. And so what Ott does in the beginning of his book is to give a long listing explanation of the theological grades of certainty. And so it starts out with this highest level, which is revealed truths, and then it goes on to, you know, various lesser things, to, you know, down to the point where it would be what they would say, temerarious or imprudent to doubt something that's at the lowest level, you know, but still being taught by the church. So that there could be something that is, in all likelihood, very true, but it just doesn't have quite the note of authority behind it that things at the top level would. And all that really makes sense because that's how it is in everything else we do in life. We know some things we're absolutely sure. We're absolutely certain of certain things. We draw conclusions from them. Certain other things are related to those things that we know for certain. And so we end up in our own minds, in just everyday life, with a hierarchy of knowledge. Some things we absolutely know. Others are highly probable. Others are less probable. Others we're still pretty sure of, but there's maybe some, you know, room for interpretation, down to the point where we know some things are simply not true. So there's a whole range of things in everyday life, but also in theology.
Yeah, very good. Why do you think that's fallen out of fashion? I think it's coming back, though. But there was a while where, you know, theological notes were kind of dismissed for a while. And do you know why that is? Was it because of manualism or?
Well, first of all, I hope you're right that it's coming back. I'm not sure to what extent it is. But of course, at some point it will come back, because the human mind, even if it takes over centuries, always searches for truth. Aristotle taught this. Man by nature desires to know. That was his first line in the book of Metaphysics.
Right.
So we always want to know. And what is it we want to know? We want to know the truth. Okay? Even if it's uncomfortable, we want to know the truth. But you can go through periods of time where people are more focused on feelings, say, than truth, that kind of thing. And we're in one of those periods of history.
Yeah.
But at some point, when you focus on things other than truth, after a while it cloys, or it becomes dull, or becomes something that actually doesn't move the person. Where, people have died for truth, truth of all sorts, not just theological truth, because it's that important. And truth is something that invigorates life. It makes it worthwhile. The search for truth, the keeping of truth. And so I think that, at some point we'll see a turn back. And I think, as you say, that the whole notion of different levels of certainty regarding different things, I hope that's coming back. But even if it's not in too much evidence now, eventually it will come back.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, very good. So then, Ott then states the faith, its level of certitude or solemnity. And then he does something that's really important. He states the councils or official teaching in regards to that doctrine. So in this case, he goes to Vatican I. And, that's so important, Karl, because I know as an apologist, whenever somebody asks me a question I don't know about, my first step is to find out what does the church teach on that issue.
Yeah, and here, we're not getting Ludwig Ott's opinion. He's citing church authority.
Right.
So often it's councils, not just ecumenical councils, but lesser ones throughout history. He cites theologians such as Augustine and Aquinas and many others. So his citations are all over the place. So when you want to find out what does the church teach on X, not only do you find the teaching from Ott, you find out where the church has taught that, when it has taught it, in what context the teaching came up. For example, in the early centuries, there was great controversy about the nature of Christ. Did he have one will or two wills, one nature or two natures, and so on? All that was finally decided at ecumenical councils. So it's one thing to say, he had two natures, divine and human, and that's true. But you also, as an apologist, want to back it up with the sources of that teaching, and Ott does that very well.
Yes, yeah, very good. So it's kind of one-stop shopping as far as, if you want to see primary source material, he gives it all there in summary form. And then usually he'll go to, go ahead.
No. In summary form, he doesn't give long paragraphs of quotation. It's uncommon for him to give more than 2 to 3 sentences at a spot. But he'll cite scripture. I'm looking at a page now, and I'm looking at, in one short paragraph, I'm looking at half a dozen scriptural citations on this particular point. But then he's also going on to councils and, he's got proof from scripture on this particular issue, proof from tradition, which would include councils and so forth, scholastic proof from reason. So, for example, how Thomas Aquinas would think the thing through. And he precedes all that with the formal teaching of the church. He says that the teaching on this topic is such and so. And he lists after that de fide. So we know that's absolutely something we have to hold as true. And so he breaks it down much in a Thomistic way, in that everything's segmented. But then once you finish reading these, here it's a page and a half on this particular topic, you come away saying, I've got a good grasp of this. I understand how these pieces fit together. I understand how the church historically came up with this teaching and why at a particular time it needed to get rid of error. And now it all makes sense to me. Yeah, I really appreciate the scripture and also early church father citations.
it's almost like a prepackaged apology. If someone wants to say, well, where's that in the Bible? Ludwig Ott will give you maybe a half dozen verses that support the particular teaching.
And, he's fair to the opposition. He quotes people on the other side that the doctors implicitly refute. So, for example, Martin Luther is frequently cited as being wrong at particular points, but you've got the sources there, and so you can see what the opponents of Catholic teaching taught on particular things, where they taught it, the book or what have you, and then Ott goes on to explain why they were wrong, and here's the teaching, and here's what backs up the teaching.
Yeah, that's a great point. I forgot about that, but he names names as far as the people or groups that have denied the proposition.
Yeah, he names Luther a lot because Luther, of course, was a fellow German. So,
yeah.
Fair enough, because Luther, not just when was writing, but even in our own time, even if he's not as well studied as maybe he once was, even by Protestants, much of his teaching still underlies the distinctions between Protestantism and Catholicism. And so Ott spends, a fair amount here and there where the topic is appropriate on explaining why Luther's teaching or Calvin's teaching or Wycliffe's teaching, whoever it might be, from the Reformers, why they got something wrong and what the real teaching is.
Yeah, in fact, I just used it for a really obscure topic of Luther claiming that Christ in the Eucharist partakes of certain divine attributes like omnipresence. And I jumped to Ott, and Ott gave a couple of citations where old Lutheran theologians, intimate that, which otherwise I wouldn't have a clue where to find it,
No, you get a topic like that, and you say to yourself, okay, I've got a wide theological library, maybe, or apologetical library at my home, and I've got all these several books. Where do I begin to find an answer to this particular thing?
Yeah, right.
It may not be a big point. It might not be one that comes up every time you get on the radio or make a public talk, or maybe never comes up at all. But it's still something of interest. It's worth handling. But where do you begin? And often, going to Ott is the best place to begin because he'll not only maybe answer to your satisfaction, but he'll also point you towards other places. He'll say, here's what the Fathers say, so you can go read the Fathers.
Yeah, very good. We're chatting with Karl Keating about Ludwig Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. We'll be right back right after this break.
In the Footsteps of Christ, a Lenten reflection from St. John Paul II. St. Paul writes in Philippians 2, Christ Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God something to be grasped. Rather, he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. Coming in human likeness and found in human appearance, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. According to Pope St. John Paul II, believers are called to follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, true God and true man, who, in perfect obedience to the will of the Father, emptied himself and humbly gave himself to us in selfless and total love, even unto death on a cross. Calvary eloquently proclaims the message of the Blessed Trinity's love for human beings of all times and places. The love of God poured into our hearts ought to inspire and transform who we are and what we do. Christians must not think that they can seek the true good of their brothers and sisters without embodying the charity of Christ. The Son of God loved us first with an unconditional love which asks nothing in return. If this is so, how can we fail to see the season of Lent as a providential opportunity for altruism and generosity? I'm Matthew Arnold, and this has been a Lenten reflection from St. John Paul II on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. We're chatting with Master Apologist Karl Keating about the Catholic Apologetic Classic Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig Ott. And, Karl, right before the break, you made an excellent point. This book, although it's kind of in an outline form, it's really almost like a master index of theology that points you to various sources.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And for most purposes, just going to Ott is enough. You get the information you need. Mm-hmm. But there are other books where we'll give you the right answer, but then you don't know where to go if you need more information on that topic. Ott provides that. So I mentioned before the break, at a particular point in a short paragraph, he has half a dozen scriptural citations that help prove this topic from Scripture, and then it goes on, and he has an equal number of citations proving it from church councils and the like, and then some citations proving it from the arguments of theologians such as Aquinas. So you're able, if you wanted to, on this narrow topic I'm looking at, you could go and spend days tracking these things down and reading up on them, and you'd end up with a kind of mini college-level course on that narrow theme. So it's a nice thing about is that you can get as much information as you want, as deep an understanding of something as you want, and by going to him, either enough for immediate purposes or to write your college thesis, whatever it may be, because he'll lead you where you need to go.
Yes. In fact,
way,
yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, by the way, the book has a wonderful index to the Old and New Testaments. So what you can do there, you can look up, for example, here I'm looking at 2 Corinthians 6, and it's got maybe 20 citations on different pages to that chapter. So if you're in reading the Bible and you're saying, what does this mean theologically? What implications does St. Paul's teaching have? You can go here and then track it down throughout all the different topics in Ott to see what that means. So that's a really handy thing to do, I think, for Bible study. Because, we have Bible studies of a certain level that we're all familiar with. But I don't know of any Bible study that actually says, here are the theological implications from what is said in this verse or this chapter or what have you. But Ott lets you do that. So you can go from his index and just read everything, sort of working backwards. And that's a wonderful way, I think, to get a better understanding of what Scripture means from a kind of different perspective than we normally have. Also, his book has a wonderful index of persons. So you want to go in there and, see what, say, Pius XII taught on something. He's got maybe 30 citations of Pius XII. And, or the ancient heretic Origen, he's the fellow who said that, hell will be emptied at the end of time and everybody goes to heaven regardless. There are even more citations to him. So here's somebody who's largely been refuted, by the church and by Ott. But there you can look him up, and you can work the other way around. So you want to look up Luther, you want to look up Calvin, you want to look up St. Athanasius. You can do that, and again, you sort of work backwards by using the index.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great suggestion, and it just shows how powerful this book is as far as its utility. You could use it so many different ways.
Yeah, it also shows what a mind for organization Ludwig Ott had, that he could put together something like this. And this is truly a masterwork. This is the kind of thing that if this is the only book you produce in your life, you've spent your life well.
And it probably would take a lifetime to write something like this, because just the incredible detail it goes into.
You have to study all this first. You have to learn all this and somehow organize it in your mind before you can put pen to paper. So, this is an impressive piece of work, and it's just a pity that it's not on, it's not found on everybody's desk, and it really ought to be.
Yeah, absolutely. He also makes use of another book. It's almost, to me, it's almost like this book pairs well with Ott, and that is Denzinger, Sources of Catholic Dogma or Doctrine.
Yeah.
Which probably could be a show in itself, but maybe we could talk a little bit about Denzinger and how it fits in with Ott.
Actually, that would be a good thing for another show. But yes, Denzinger is a book that demonstrates Catholic teaching largely through short quotations of authoritative writers and so forth, councils and writers and what have you. So there's a kind of parallelism there in Denzinger, although Ott does something that Denzinger doesn't even attempt. He refutes error. He explains, here's the error, and here's why it's wrong, and here's what the church really teaches. And that's not the purpose of Denzinger. But I think, for another show, we should do Denzinger.
Yeah, because it's a compendium of official teachings, and Ott he'll cite D126, which is the paragraph number in Denzinger. So if you have Denzinger next to you, you could just open up and actually read the documents themselves.
Yes, and Denzinger has, the most relevant parts of documents. So it might be a 10,000-word document, only 500 words of which are relevant to a particular issue, and he's got those, Yeah, so those two together, I think, would make a wonderful combination. You could spend years studying just those two, but you would end up a mastermind in Catholic teaching.
If you could remember it. If you can remember it.
But you read it often enough, a lot more of it sinks in than you think. You don't need to have a strong theological background to absorb either from Denzinger or Ott. You simply have to sit down and read. And, Thomas Aquinas said when he wrote the Summa Theologiae, it was intended for beginners. It's 3,000 pages of very big text, big pages, small text, 3,000 pages. It's a very long book, but actually it's for beginners. And in a way, Ott's sort of the same. If you look at the book, it's just all gray, no pictures, small font. People like me have to wear glasses to read it. But it's all here, and it's not actually hard. It's not like you're trying to learn calculus or something. It's all very straightforward. And almost anybody, I think, could read through this and grasp the teaching on whatever point might be of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's so many. You could use it for a Bible study. You could use it for learning about the early church fathers, and most especially, of course, is the theological things. And Terry Barber's always telling me to give action items, and maybe for Lent, if you pick up Ott, maybe you could just read a section a day, or a paragraph a day, or something, and just slowly work through the work. And when you're done, you'll have a really good grasp of at least an overview of the faith.
Yeah, here, for example, I'm looking at this section about the procession of the Holy Spirit from the Father and the Son and how that's done. Okay, and it takes 2.5 pages in Ott, but there's a lot of material in there, and like in every other situation, he gives the teaching of the church, then he's proof from Scripture, proof from tradition, proof from reason, which is to say, the theologians, and you learn what the church really teaches and why. And contrary opinions are refuted. That's only 2.5 pages. You read something like that each day of Lent, you'll end up having a lot of, not just nuggets of the faith, but you'll know some real substance, and you'll know it real well without having to put in a whole lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about Ott is even when I'm just browsing through it, there's always something that will jump out that either I never heard of or never understood. And, you'll discover all these little nuggets of the faith that maybe you certainly probably never heard in high school catechesis, if you went to high school catechesis. There's lots of surprising things that you wouldn't expect there.
That's right. It's one of those great books to open randomly, just point your finger down and read for a paragraph.
Yeah.
It's sort of like opening a dictionary, putting your finger down and learning a new word, you know?
Yeah.
But here you learn something of deeper substance than from a dictionary. But it's like that. You don't have to read it in order. And just any direction you want, any page you want, you're going to learn something, and you'll take delight in it. Say, I've learned something new about the faith, something that will strengthen my prayer life or my devotional life or my moral life or what have you.
Yeah.
It's all there. And just take it randomly if you're not inclined to go straight through.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, trust me, folks. Like things like the Creed will suddenly jump out with new meaning if you work it through odd. So wow, that's I can't believe our hour has already flown. But I want to talk to you, Karl, about. I know you have the manuscript coming. Any other projects in hand?
Well, yeah, I'm working on a book, early stages. I hope to get busy on it really soon, regarding a look at a historical moral conundrum of the last century, namely the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so that's something I'm working on. Got a lot of reading to do and a lot of writing to do fairly quickly. So that's in the works. And I got a few other books planned. So this is going to be a busy year for me in terms of getting output.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the busiest retired people I know. It's like you're always, if you aren't writing, you're on the trail researching to do writing.
Yeah, well, I may as well do it while I can, right? Because there'll come a time when you're going to have to rest,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, you're definitely making use of the time God has given you. Where can people go to get a hold of all the great books that you've published?
Well, of course, all my books are available through Amazon. Just look up my name in the search bar on Amazon, and you'll see them all there. That's the easiest way to do it. As for the book of today, you might find a used copy being sold through Amazon of Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. I'd certainly look. There may be, I don't know if it's still in print otherwise. I haven't checked, but it might be that new copies are available from some publisher. But I would say that as soon as anyone, turns off this podcast today, go look up Ott and get a copy, because it's a book you ought to have.
Yeah. In fact, I know there's a new edition of Ott. It's very expensive. I think it's through Baronia's Press. I'm kind of working through it right now. But I like the older version. It's very detailed, and it's just a little bit more updated with the new edition.
Okay. Well, wonderful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Karl. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, man, this hour flies, especially with Karl Keating. It's so much fun, so much information. It's just time flies when you're having fun. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to have William Albrecht come on the show. We're going to talk about the doctrine of original sin in Scripture and patristics, or early church fathers. And, of course, coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. And it's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center here, turn off the dojo lights. Thank you so much for listening to the program, and God willing, we'll talk again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.